welcome. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar on inclusive onboarding with Dr. Linda Wiley Bing. My name is Kylie, and I'm the U.S. Outreach Specialist at Factorial HR. Today, we are really happy to have Dr. Linda here with us. She's the founder and CEO of Turning Point Leadership Group, LLC, an innovative performance improvement company that specializes in DEI, leadership development, and relationship management. Dr. Linda is an inspirational speaker, certified life coach, certified diversity coach, and so much more. Needless to say, she's very talented. For 25 years, Dr. Linda and her team have created more diverse, equitable, and inclusive cultures in large and small companies, government agencies, and nonprofits around the world. Today, Dr. Linda is here with us to discuss the inclusive onboarding process and how it enables high performance, psychological safety, and belonging. But before we begin, just a little bit about Factorial. We are an all-in-one provider of software solutions for people teams. Our software features time and attendance tracking, applicant tracking, and performance reviews, and much more. We streamline HR processes, giving HR professionals more time to dedicate to what really matters, their employees. This webinar is interactive and we encourage your participation. And if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat during the presentation or share them afterward in the Q&A session. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Linda.
Memories are more powerful when we make them together, shared with friends and loved ones. Every flight is a chance to celebrate together. And when we celebrate, we connect the world.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard.
And thank you for flying with Delta.
Our first priority on every flight is the health and safety of our customers and crew. So before we depart,
Please pay attention to this important safety message. Be sure that all carry-on items are securely stowed in an overhead bin and place smaller items, including handbags, under the seat in front of you. If you lose your electronic device in your seat, please do not adjust your seat and ask a crew member for assistance. Please ensure all aisles, exits, and bulkhead areas are clear.
as we leave the gate, make sure your seatbelt is fastened. To fasten, insert the metal tip into the buckle and adjust the strap so it's low and tight across your lap. To release the belt, just lift the top of the buckle. If your seat has a shoulder harness, secure it by attaching the metal tip to the fitting on the belt. To release, remove the metal tip and allow the shoulder harness to retract.
Please remain seated with your seatbelt securely fastened anytime the seatbelt sign is on. Even if the sign is off, please keep your seatbelt fastened whenever you're seated in case of sudden rough air. In the event of rough air, the crew might also need to buckle up for safety. We apologize if this means our service is interrupted.
Federal regulations require all passengers to comply with the posted placards and lighted information signs located throughout the cabin, in addition to any crew member's instructions.
Smoking, the use of e-cigarettes, or any smokeless product, including chewing tobacco, is not allowed on any Delta flight. Federal law prohibits tampering with, disabling, or destroying restroom smoke detectors. There are 8 exits on this plane, 8 doors, 4 on each side. Each door has a detachable slide that can be used as a raft. In the event of an evacuation, leave all carrying items behind. All exits are clearly marked with a green symbol. Arrows indicate the direction to these exits. Please take a moment to find the exits closest to you and remember they might be behind you. If there's a loss of power, lights will illuminate the aisle to guide you to an exit.
It's unlikely, but if cabin pressure changes, the panels inside the lavatories and above your seat will open, revealing oxygen masks. If this happens, reach up and pull the mask or red streamer towards you until the tube is fully extended to start the flow of oxygen. Place the mask over your nose and mouth, slip the elastic strap over your head, and adjust the mask if necessary. Breathe normally and know that oxygen is flowing, so don't worry if the bag doesn't inflate. Be sure to adjust your own mask before helping others.
A water evacuation is also unlikely, but just in case, life vests are in a compartment beneath or adjacent to your seat. To use, remove the vest from its container by pulling on the tab and then opening the pouch. Slip the vest over your head, wrap the strap around your waist, and attach it to the buckle in front, and adjust securely around your waist. As you leave the plane, inflate the vest by pulling down on the red tab at the bottom of the vest, or manually inflate it by blowing into the tube at shoulder level. A water-activated light is attached to each vest.
For children who weigh less than 35 pounds, place the vest around the infant's waist and secure the strap between the legs. Refer to the safety information card for more information. Additional life vests for in-lap children are located in a marked compartment at the front and rear of the plane. We'll distribute these vests if necessary.
Now, before we take off, be sure your seat is upright. Your aisle armrests are at resting position and your tray table is put away. If you have a suite door, ensure it is open. Please note that there is a placard on the door, visible when closed, explaining how to use the suite door in case of an emergency. Please take a moment to review the safety information card, which is in your seat pocket.
As we come through the cabin for our final safety check, please let us know if you have any questions.
Wherever your celebrations take you, thanks for choosing Delta to fly you there. Now, as we get ready for takeoff, please settle in and have a wonderful flight. Thank you for flying with Delta.
Good day, everyone, and welcome. No, you are not at an airline safety presentation. That's not what this is about. You are in the right place. I'm Dr. Linda, and this is Inclusive Onboarding, Cultivating a Sense of Belonging. So, why have I chosen to introduce this workshop with a Delta Airlines safety message? In the line of work that I'm in, so much of the time is spent getting on and off planes that whenever I hear the word onboarding, the first thought that comes to mind for me is boarding an airplane. And given that I live in Atlanta, which is the worldwide hub for Delta Airlines, most of those flights are Delta flights. But there are lots of similarities between boarding a plane and onboarding employees. Onboarding passengers and onboarding employees has more similarities than you might realize. So let's get back to the actual presentation, and I'll walk you through some of those. All right, when we look at inclusive onboarding, the process begins with ticket purchase. So if I'm about to board a flight as a passenger, when I'm being onboarded by Delta employees or any employee of that airline, it begins with the ticket purchase. Was it a fast process? Was it complicated? Was it user-friendly? Did I have all the information that I needed? Were the steps clearly laid out for me? What was that ticket purchase process like? When we think about the actual message that's delivered, it's delivered in a number of different ways. Now, the airline could very easily put together just their documentation and ask that we all just read the documentation. But they know that memories are more powerful when we make them together. So rather than each individual passenger simply read through the documentation, there's always a flight attendant who will stand up and deliver the message so that the memory is made together. And in the event that we need to use any of that information, it's a much more powerful memory. It causes us to connect. And as things happen that we might need to celebrate, we celebrate together. I don't know about you, but I've been on my fair share of flights that have had uncomfortable turbulence. And when the wheels touch the ground, the entire plane is full of cheers and clapping, et cetera, because we're all celebrating that nice, smooth, safe landing. Another thing about inclusive boarding of a plane is that we get our information from a diverse team. If you're on a good size flight, there's more than one flight attendant. And the flight attendant, just by having more than one person, represents diversity. It does not matter what their ethnicity is, their gender identity, their age, just by virtue of the fact that there are two or more, we have some diversity. And in this particular presentation, you saw that they were even using sign language. So we are continuing to expand the diversity of the messaging during onboarding. Much of it was about rules, roles, and responsibilities. You heard about stowing packages, aisle safety, exit strategies, et cetera. And in the end, there was the reminder that there is documentation you can go back to should this be overwhelming or if you forget. And one of the things that I find most important of all is it is presented with warmth and well wishes. I've been on some flights where the flight attendants go that extra mile and they make it something that's comical and humorous because they want it to be a feel-good experience. We often have a better chance of remembering what was said when the manner in which it was said was one that conveys fun and friendliness and warmth. So as I wish you well, let's transition to talking about what is onboarding and how does that video relate to what you came to hear about today. I'm defining onboarding as the process by which new members of your team are formally introduced to their colleagues, their roles and responsibilities, and the company culture. I'm going to come back to that word formally in just a moment. Onboarding takes on many forms. It does not just happen through the presentation. Usually in the onboarding process, there might be a day or more of actual meetings that the person has to attend. You might have to watch some videos and sign off that you actually watch them. There may be documents you have to sign. So it takes place in a number of different formats. And it often comprises the first 90 days on the job. And those first 90 days are usually the most vulnerable time in your journey. Now, onboarding is said to be the single most impactful opportunity to lay the groundwork for a new hire sense of belonging. So we really need to give great consideration to this, especially now. We are in that period that's being called the period of great resignation, or some are saying the period of great retention. However you choose to look at it, we need to understand that as we're bringing new people onto the teams and into our workplace cultures, what impression do we need to make upon them to make sure that they stay? And not just stay, but stay and become engaged and have a pleasurable experience and be contributing employees to the bottom line. I mentioned to you that the word formal was going to be important in just a moment. And that's because there are many informal ways that our employees get onboarded. Some of those informal ways come through observations. What do they see and hear? How are people dressed? What are we seeing on the walls? What's the condition of the workplace environment? How are people speaking to one another? Are there smiles going on? As you walk down the hall, are you greeted with a hello or a nod of the head or something to acknowledge your presence? What kind of stories are you hearing? What are people speaking about in the break room or in the cafeteria? And we also need to think about what groups are there in the organization. I don't mean the little informal cliques, though you need to pay attention to them as well, but I'm thinking more about, does your organization have employee resource groups or business resource groups or colleague resource groups, whatever you choose to call them? But is there a safe space where people can go and gather in order to learn more about how to navigate through the system? All of this is more informal than formal, but it leaves a great impact on people. And as the slide shows, it is the single most impactful opportunity to lay the groundwork for a new hire sense of belonging. So now, how does the video relate to the onboarding of employees? There are 4 phases to the onboarding process. Phase 1 is pre-onboarding. Phase 2 would be welcoming new hires. Phase 3 would be the role-specific training that you provide. And phase 4 is easing the transition so that they're easing from being a new hire into their role. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of those 4. So with the first one, phase 1 or pre-onboarding, it begins as soon as a candidate accepts your offer. So you are pre-onboarding or onboarding in phase 1 as soon as that candidate accepts your offer. In fact, I would say that how you extend the offer is even part of that process, because it could make a difference with respect to whether or not they feel comfortable accepting. Is it a letter? Is it a phone call? Is it a combination? What exactly is part of that process? And it continues until their first day of joining or their first day of actually being at work. Another aspect of the pre-onboarding is that it helps employees complete all of the necessary paperwork. So make sure that you have the resources available for that, that people know where to go to get their questions answered and the help that they need. During this phase, if they are relocating, check to see if they need any help finding local services. This can be really important. Say, for instance, and I don't mean to stereotype in any way, but I do have to speak in general terms in order to help get the point across. So for instance, I have found in my experience that it's very important to make sure that women, for example, understand things like where they can go to get their hair and nails done, or parents need to understand where they can put their children into preschool. Some people will want to know about what are local places of worship that I can attend. Those are things that we don't always think about when we think about the onboarding process. But if people are new coming into an area, having some of those options laid out for them to investigate goes a long way. So we need to make sure that we're considering some of the uniqueness and the diversity of the people that are joining the organization. Another thing that can take place during this phase is you can send them a video or some sort of document that gives a brief idea about how your organization works and what their first day will look like. In some instances, I've seen companies put in a map. How do you navigate the campus if it's a large campus that you're onboarding? Again, what organizations, what departments, what's in existence to help so that people feel comfortable when they arrive. If you're going to do a video, you might think about some of the people who will be actually doing the onboarding process when they arrive, putting them in the video so that those faces look familiar as soon as they show up on the campus. So those are just some of the things you might want to take into consideration about pre-onboarding. Then we go to phase 2, welcome new hires. You want to keep the first day as simple as possible. Just remember that anxiety is high, there's overwhelming things taking place, and you don't want anyone to get into a space where they're feeling overwhelmed. So keep the first day as simple as possible. During this phase, you're going to help them grasp your organizational culture and how your work practices are aligned with it. You should be talking about topics, of course, things like time off, attendance, etc. But this is also a good time to talk about your DEI policies and practices. In fact, if your organization provides DEI training for the employees, you should consider doing DEI training for the new hires so that in a class, they are coming in, getting the same DEI information, understanding the policies and practices that take place, knowing about ERGs that they might be able to join. They can get all of that up front and don't have to wait for the next iteration of DEI training to roll around before they actually get the opportunity. You want to introduce your new hires to their teammates and other stakeholders. And again, depending on your organization and its culture, you may have already sent out a video where all of your employees are saying hello. And think about this. What if you are a global organization and now you have employees who are joining from all around the world? Maybe you have a brief message from each team member in their native language with a subscript in the language of the employee who's joining. Anything that makes it fun and welcoming and feel like we're part of a team. Because again, remember, we want to connect and we want to celebrate together. You want to assign an inclusion ambassador. Now, this, I'm sure, is a new term for most of you. It's something that we talk about at Turning Point Leadership Group, but not everyone is familiar with an inclusion ambassador. You have the scope to make this as inclusive as you want, but it's a good idea to assign a peer, a partner, a mentor, whatever word you choose to resonate with this, but assign someone to that new hire that can help them navigate. One person to go to if they have questions. So they're not going to this big ominous HR department, or they're not going to the finance or the payroll department. They're going to the ambassador to help them get questions answered. This would also be someone who could help with some of those informal processes, help them with the stories, help them understand what the pecking order is, help them understand things like, consider this. This is how you really get to know the culture of an organization. It's not what we say in the onboarding alone. It's the unwritten rules. If your spouse, daughter, son, brother, sister, loved one in any capacity was joining the organization, what things would you whisper in their ear, pull them aside and share with them before their first day on the job? Those are the informal things that an inclusion ambassador can help with. There are many messages that they won't get, but if you bump into that, not a good thing. So when you care about someone, you want to make sure that you give them a heads up, and an inclusion ambassador is someone that can do that. And then lastly, in this phase, you want to check in periodically. Just have a quick meeting with your new hires to make sure that everything is going well, they're comfortable, they're adjusting. And again, because you are the manager, the vice president, whatever your title might be, they're still going to be a little tenuous. They may not want to share everything with you, but they will share some things, and other things they might talk to that inclusion ambassador about. So those are some of the things you do to welcome. Phase 3, role-specific training. Now, part of onboarding takes place on the actual job floor itself. And the training phase is one of the most important phases of onboarding. This is usually outside of the hands of the HR department. This is when they're in their own team, their work environment, and their boss is now helping them with role-specific training. In some organizations, it might still be an HR. It might be a part of the learning and development responsibility, but it's directly correlated with how successful new employees will be at their jobs. The quality of that role-specific training is critical. But again, it should not just stop there. Yes, people are hired on to perform a certain role or function, but we also want to give some unconscious bias training. We want to make sure that they're coming in aware of what biases and perceptions, preconceived notions they might have, as well as understanding what that looks like in the organization. And in your unconscious bias training at this level, you want to be sure to introduce those DEI initiatives, make sure they understand everyone, regardless of how they come packaged or what their uniqueness happens to be. In this day and age, people want to know that there's something being done to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. So tell them about initiatives, encourage their participation. You want to make sure that you cover anti-harassment and anti-discrimination policies that the company has, and make the resources available. So if I'm feeling overwhelmed, is there an EAP, an employee assistance program that I can go to maybe for some mental health help? Is there a gym where I can go and work out? Who is my inclusion ambassador? Where do I go to find out information about my paycheck? Those kinds of things. You also want to make sure you have a new hire training plan. What's going to be the progression? Where will they go first? So it should be several days. It could be cut into small chunks, but there should be a process that you're following in order to ensure that new employees, new hires are going through a training process. And you want the new hire training plan to be somewhat specific, because you need to address the unique needs of individuals in order to make sure that there's equity, not just equality. Now, this is a meme that you've probably seen or some variation of it on social media. But for those perhaps who have not, let me just briefly walk you through. So the first photo to the left, you've got 3 individuals all watching a baseball game, and the baseball field is behind a fence. If we're treating everyone equally, we give each one of them a box to stand on because we recognize there's some height to the fence. We want to make sure that everyone can see over the fence. But as you can see, it's fine for the first 2 individuals, but that third person still cannot see. So while they're being treated equally, they're not being treated equitably because the resources provided to them are not addressing the issue of seeing over the fence. If we move to the middle picture, what we're seeing is equity. The first person does not need to have a box because that individual is tall enough to see over the fence on their own. The second individual only needs 1 box, but that third individual needs 2. So there are some employees who might say, well, that's not fair. Why does one person get 2 boxes and the other person only gets 1 and someone else gets none at all? Well, what we're doing is being equitable. We want to make sure that everyone has what they need for the job at hand. In this case, observing the baseball game. So it is fair because we're giving everyone a level playing field with which to participate. And then the last one kind of solves the problem in advance. Now we don't have to keep guessing how many boxes. We make a fence that you can see through, and no matter who pulls up, whether they're walking, whether they're in a wheelchair, no matter what the case is, we know that they are able to observe the game. So we want to make sure that we have a new hire training plan that takes into consideration the diversity of that particular individual that's coming in. Most of the plan will be general, but we need to have some uniqueness to it as well. And then we have that 4th and final phase, which is easing the transition. Now, easing the transition, you want them to go from being new hire to feeling like a full-fledged employee. One of the things that I often suggest is that you have a new hire ERG. Most organizations don't think about that, but many times when you're bringing people into the organization, they're going to be going off into different parts of the business. So coming in, everyone is in this class. We're going through our onboarding process together. We're taking our DEI class together. All of these things are great. But then when I'm assigned to the job, I might be the only one going to my team or my department. When you have a new hire ERG, you can have monthly calls or Zoom meetings. And in those monthly meetings, you can check in to see how the process is going. It allows people to come back together with familiar people with whom they've bonded and celebrated during that initial onboarding process. Those memories are powerful because they were all made together. These things can now take hold. You can also use this to invite guest speakers to those monthly meetings. So I might be assigned to the marketing department, but maybe there's a guest speaker one month who comes on from engineering, and someone who comes on from HR, and someone who comes on from finance. So now as a new hire, I'm not only making bonds and connections, but I'm getting to see how the business works, how it's tied together, what other departments exist, and how they contribute to my work, and how what I do contributes to their work. Because for some employees, the big picture makes a tremendous difference. I can do my specific role better when I understand how it fits in. Of course, we're going to set clear expectations, SMART goals, et cetera, and conduct an early performance review so that early on you can get into a conversation and set the pattern of, we're going to check in periodically just to see how you're doing. Those would be the 4 phases of onboarding. Now, before I open up to see if there are any questions, and I do hope you have some, a successful and inclusive onboarding process enables employees to achieve 3 things. 1 is high performance, 2 is psychological safety, and 3 would be belonging. High performance basically speaks for itself. We understand, by understanding our specific roles and by having expectations and goals set, we understand what it takes to meet our goals, but we also understand what it takes to exceed them. So we understand high performance, but psychological safety and belonging are a little different. So psychological safety, we need to ensure that in the workplace, every employee believes and trusts that they can be themselves, that they can ask questions, they can share ideas and concerns, they can make mistakes as they're learning and growing, and there won't be any repercussions to that outside of, normal corrective positive feedback. But we need to make sure that they feel safe, that they can do their job freely without being punished or humiliated in any way, shape, or form. And psychological safety is a big part in feeling as if you belong. Belonging goes one step beyond inclusion. In fact, there are some organizations that are now adding belonging to the department name. So it's not just, when I started in this business 20 plus years ago, 25 years or so, it was just diversity. I've seen it go from diversity to diversity and inclusion to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now some are calling it diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. It goes one step beyond, because the most successful employees are those who feel like they really belong in this organization. I am really a part of the team. You may remember back when Sheryl Sandberg was talking about lean in. There were lots of people who felt like, I can't lean into the conversation because I'm not even in the room, or I'm in the room, but I'm not at the table. So we started including more people, but there are still some who are there and they might be included in speaking up, but they don't feel as if their comments carry as much weight as the comments of other people, or they feel like their concerns are not taken seriously like some of the concerns of other people. Those are the folks that we still have to establish this sense of belonging. And in his book called Belonging at Work, a very good read by Rhodes Perry, Rhodes Perry lays out 4 P's of belonging. He talks about people, place, process, and power. Again, those 4 are people, place, process, and power. So people would talk about who are the employees that are most likely to be positively or negatively impacted by whatever policy, practice, or procedure we have in place. Then we move to the psychological safety, which gets at the place. Do I feel comfortable here? Many people are not returning to the workplace these days because it was not a psychologically safe place to be. And now that they've gone back to experiencing the psychological safety of working from home, many people are saying, I'm not going back into that toxic work environment. Something has to change. So again, place is important. Then we get to process, which is how inclusive or exclusive are your policies, practices, and procedures. We may have nice, neat policies that everyone can recite by heart, but is that what the employees are actually experiencing? And are they experiencing it in an equal and an equitable way across the organization? And then the last one, power, really speaks to barriers. What are some of the obstacles and barriers that get in people's way? And does everyone have the same opportunity to either break through those barriers or work around those barriers? So those would be some of the additional things that help employees to feel as if they belong. And I'm not forgetting about those who are still working at home and perhaps have always worked at home. When we're thinking about virtual onboarding, here are just a few tips. You want to immerse the new hires in the culture from the beginning. So create a space for the team. There are different software and social media platforms that teams use so that they can relate, have conversations, semi-private conversations, and share thoughts and ideas and feelings and emotions. It's a great thing to do. You also want to have one-on-one meetings. You want to have get to know you team sessions. So a get to know you team session can be a time when you just set up for a social hour for the team. Maybe it's a time where no work gets done or discussed. We're going to play a game, or we're going to all, have a sip and paint and sip party, where we're painting and we're sipping our favorite non-alcoholic beverage because we still are on the clock, but we're doing something fun and we're engaging with one another. Those are some of the things you want to do to make people feel as if they're a part of the team, even when they're not physically in the same space. And of course, you want to avoid Zoom overload. These past 2 years, people are just, Zoom or death by Zoom, it's like we're on these calls forever. Well, you want to make sure that you keep the calls brief. So maybe if you've got an 8-hour onboarding process, you break it into 2 hours across 4 days. And part of the process should be something that's fun and enjoyable. So as I close and open up for questions, let me just leave you with this quote. L'Oreal is one of the organizations that is said to really get DEI and be doing a good job of it in their culture. And so the director of internal learning practice at L'Oreal says, our objective is to take our onboarding practices to the next level and to give each and every employee from the moment they arrive the keys to succeed in full alignment with company values such as multiculturalism, diversity, and inclusion. I would imagine that most of you on this call have a similar objective. The question is, how are you going to get there? So as we open for questions, let me just share with you how you can contact us. My organization, again, is called Turning Point Leadership Group. You see our website there, as well as the phone number. And if you want to email me, I welcome the emails. If you have a question, I'd be happy to try to answer that for you, get you pointed in the right direction. What you would do is send it to Dr. Linda at turningpointlg.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn, Linda Wiley Bing. And for the women in the group, I do want to share with you that we do coaching for women. We have an offset of Turning Point Leadership Group that's called Dr. Linda Coaching. And the tagline for Dr. Linda is leadership, confidence, style. Those are the 3 things that we really are pouring into women, because we understand from the research and the reading that's out there that those are 3 areas where women are lacking. Confidence is said to be the #1 characteristic that women need to feel empowered on the job. And part of the way that you get to feel confident is through whatever your style happens to be, upgrading your style to make sure that it's authentically you and that it also fits in with the culture of the organization. So whatever your need might be in the DEI or leadership space, Turning Point Leadership Group and drlinda.com, we would love to partner with you in those areas. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I will ask that Kaylee, if you would just help me navigate through the questions, We'll get the questions answered.
Of course. So I wanted to say one more time, if anyone has any questions, you can send it in the chat. One question that we have in the Q&A is this webinar going to be sent out to participants? Yes, this webinar is recorded and we're going to share it in the next few days via email. So everyone will have the recording shared with them via email.
I hope that means that that person found it to be valuable
Yeah,
and they want to make sure that they can look at it again and share it with some other people. So it is always my intent to add value. I don't take it lightly that you take time out of your busy day to come and join me for a presentation like this. All I want to do is add value, and hopefully I've done that.
Yes, Dr. Linda. And I also wanted to say thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. It was very useful, and it looks like some questions are coming in. Dr. Linda, how do you suggest we explore or get to know the uniqueness of a new hire to adjust the onboarding?
Excellent question. So in some instances, and again, a lot of this might depend on what country you're in, there's certain data that gets captured, and some people are forthcoming with that data. Most organizations that I'm familiar with in the US do ask questions about gender identity. They ask questions about ethnicity and race. They ask questions about disabilities. So if you get that, you can ask if someone tells you that they have a disability, you can ask if there are any special accommodations that need to be made. And you can build that into your onboarding process. So you can make sure that you have interpreters, or you have subtitles to all of your meetings, or those kinds of things. Many times you won't know specifically until the person actually gets in and starts working in the organization. But you can always add, and again, because you have to pay attention to the laws in your country, but you can always get in and ask questions about, are there any special considerations? You can even ask things about dietary. I mean, when you think about it, there are lots of people that are going vegetarian and vegan. Wouldn't it be great to have those kinds of things in your cafeteria? There are people who are dairy-free, gluten-free, have those kinds of options in your cafeteria. Now, I realize that that may not be specific to their role on the job, but again, to the extent that you make it a pleasant and comfortable work environment, it opens up the possibility for them to be able to learn more, absorb more, become more engaged, and feel good about the place and want to stay. So check with HR, see what data is already captured, find out what it's safe to capture. You can do ERG types of awareness days, and all of your ERGs can be represented so that you almost have, like if you have a large space or an atrium, each ERG can have a booth. And if they're all represented, people will go up to the booths where they either feel like they are a member of that group being represented, or where they want to be an ally to that group. So at times like that, you can gather additional information to find out about special needs. We need to get to a place where we're open and engaging about what our needs happen to be, without feeling like we're going to be stigmatized or there'll be any repercussions to sharing fully who we are. And most companies across the world are not quite there yet. So with your legal team, just find out, how do we take baby steps to get to that place?
Great, Dr. Linda, thanks so much. We have a lot more questions coming in, so that's great. The next one is from Diamante. I hope I'm saying that right. How do you get buy-in from managers or department leads to help enhance the onboarding process?
So I guess it depends on what you're specifically looking for with respect to the onboarding process. Typically in an onboarding process, it's a mandatory part of the job. So automatically the managers have to buy in. But as you're thinking about things, some of the specific things that I mentioned, like with the team calls and those sorts of things, perhaps ask your HR business partner to meet with the managers and let them know. You can have a group meeting or do some one-on-ones to let them know the benefits. 3 that I explained were high performance, psychological safety, and belonging. You can talk about the benefits of those things to the morale, but also to the bottom line. If you have a DEI department, have someone from DEI come out and speak to the managers about those things, because if the managers have a greater understanding of how that's going to help that employee be an even greater contributor to their team, then I would imagine that manager would buy in. I think a lot of it is we don't really understand or see the business case. So we need someone from either HR or from the DEI community to come and help explain that.
Great, perfect, thank you. Let's see, another question we have here is from Mary. This one is in the chat. It says, I work in the field of accessibility to help employers address ableism and ageism in the workplace. I find these areas less involved in current DEI initiatives and wonder if you see something similar or if you find that changing for the better or for the worse.
So Mary, I do see something similar. I do find that we don't hear as much about ableism and ageism, particularly the ableism. We talk about ageism lots of times by talking about generations and how to make the generations work. As most of you know, particularly if you're in HR or DEI space, we have 5 different generations working in the workplace today. And how you make that work, in fact, it's so tricky. We do a course called Making the Generational Mix Work, because you need to understand different values and characteristics of the different ages to make them work. So ageism sometimes will occur, but the more people understand how to make the generational mix work, the less of that we see. On the ableism side, there are a couple of, I don't really want to call them obstacles, but conditions we need to take into consideration. One is that many people who have disabilities are not openly expressing their disabilities. The list of disabilities by the ADA is quite long, and many of those things you might not even recognize as disabilities. But some of the illnesses that people have, whether it might be something like cancer or diabetes, some of them fall onto those listings. People who wear glasses, corrective lenses can fall on that. You know, there are all kinds of things, but people don't self-identify. So one of the reasons that organizations may not be spending lots of time and effort in that space is because their employees don't feel psychologically safe, or they feel like they'll somehow be limited if they were to acknowledge that they have a particular disability. And then I think another reason is when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, many of the examples are things that are video-based or story-based, et cetera. And many of them have to do with race and gender, because those are things that we can see. Unless someone is sight impaired, hearing impaired, or in a wheelchair, many of their disabilities are invisible disabilities. So you cannot necessarily portray them. So as a facilitator also, when I'm coming into an organization, if I'm showing a video or something, there's no way to really show many of those disabilities. So for those of you who are in the accessibility field, if you can help practitioners like myself come up with ways to help train around some of those disabilities that exist, I would welcome that. You know, I would love to be able to bring that in more top of mind. I do try to mention it, as you see in the video that I showed you. I found one where they were actually using sign language. Not all videos do that. Not all flight attendants do that. In fact, most don't. But wouldn't that be awesome if it became a requirement that at least one flight attendant on every flight needed to understand sign language so that they could quickly have conversations with people who are disabled in terms of their hearing. So yeah, I would put out an invitation. All of you who work in the area of ableism and accessibility, please, if you don't know who else to call, get in touch with Turning Point Leadership Group. We would love to find ways to partner with you to make sure that environments are more equitable and inclusive for that population.
Great answer. Thanks, Dr. Linda. So a few more still, let's see. So an anonymous attendee said, Dr. Linda, what if we don't have a set DEI policy in place? Where should a company start?
I would say start with an organization like mine. It doesn't have to be mine, but start with someone who specializes in that space. Not to say that you don't have pockets of expertise in your organization, but one of the things we have to do, 2 things. One is to recognize that in the field of HR, we cannot put all of our responsibility on your HR department. They are very good at what they do, but we have a tendency to put everything that's behavioral on top of HR, and that can be overwhelming and unfair. So you want to go to people who that's their lane. You know, if I need medical help, I'm going to a medical doctor, and even more specific, I'm going to a medical doctor that aligns with what my condition is. If I'm having, God forbid, pains in my chest, I'm not going to a dermatologist or a podiatrist, I'm going to a cardiologist. So look for someone that operates in that lane, because they can help you Ask the right questions and get the right answers. There's truth to the cliche about you don't know what you don't know. So if DEI is not what you do all day, every day, then seek the assistance of someone for whom that is their primary role all day, every day. And you're more likely to get a good DEI initiative up and running. Even in an organization, many times people will come to us and say, not sure that the C-suite is on board, not sure that our leadership team is on board. We can even help you come up with strategies from the ground up. How do you gain their commitment and their buy-in? Because we have to do something. And in this day and age, with all of the things that have been going on in the world in the last 2 to 3 years, I would hope that all companies are at least considering or taking a look at DEI initiatives.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Linda. Another question we have here is from Raphael, and he says, hello, Dr. Linda. Thank you for this pleasure presentation. Great topics. Let's see, sorry. How do you define the gap between leadership and inclusive onboarding? Many articles define leadership as the main goal to achieve so many things in the company, like performance and work engagement.
Okay, thank you, Raphael. So I look at leadership in 2 ways. There's the formal leadership based on people whose job it is to be leaders of the organization, and their titles reflect that. My view of that type of leader is you basically have 2 responsibilities. One is to remove the barriers and the obstacles that get in the way of your people doing what it is that they were hired to do. And the other one is giving people what they need to do what it is that they were hired to do. Leaders really should not be very involved in the hands-on work. You can't get away from it. Sometimes we love it. I'm the leader of my organization. I founded it. I'm the CEO. I have facilitators who go out and train, but I will sometimes still facilitate because I love it. So I still do some of it, but it's my job to create opportunities for them to do what they do and remove the barriers and obstacles that might get in the way of them doing what it is that they do. And that's one way to look at leadership. The other way to look at leadership, or another way, because I'm sure there are others, but another way to look at leadership is to consider that everyone in their own right is a leader because we all have a circle of influence. Who are the team members that you speak to? Who are your friends? Who are your colleagues? Who are the people that you have to interact with on a day-to-day basis? You have some influence over those folks. So what leadership role are you going to take to close some of those gaps? What are you going to do to educate people? Do you stand by and say nothing when someone tells a story that is inappropriate or makes a comment that's untrue or inappropriate? What do you do? So no matter who you are or what your position is in the organization, you are a leader when it comes to your circle of influence. And we cannot always wait for those at the top of the organization. Sometimes we have to nudge them a little bit because there's so many things they're doing. We may have to nudge them and say, hey, this is important to a group of people and you guys need to pay attention to it. So I would ask that everyone on the call consider yourself a leader and start thinking about the changes you want to see made in your environment and what can you do from where you sit right now to help those changes occur.
Great. And I wanted to say, Mary, who had a question before, she mentioned that she has some follow-up questions. So if anyone else has any follow-up questions that maybe they want to send to Dr. Linda via email or via LinkedIn, feel welcome to do that. And it looks like we just have another one here. It says from Samuel, how would you tackle the issue of an employee who is good at what they do, but very individualistic, and in doing so, causing dysfunction in the organization in order to promote inclusivity? That's a mouthful. I hope you yeah, okay.
So Samuel, there are 2 ways that I would address that. One way is there are certain assessments, very quick and easy assessments that you can have your employees take in order to determine whether or not they are, what type of role would be best for them. So I will extend an offer to everyone on this call. If you send me an email request, I will send you a link to an assessment that I will allow you to do for free, as long as you're not using it throughout your organization. And I will know. All I need you to do is you take it and see what it's like. And if you want to discuss it with us, we'd be happy to discuss it. So I'm going to do this. We're doing this on your honor, that you're not going to share it, you will just take it because you attended this particular event. But it takes less than 2 minutes to complete. You're going to read through, in fact, I've got a sample of some cards here. You're going to read through online what looks like these 4 cards. This card is called Blueprint, and it has 12 values on it. This one is called Action, 12 values, Nurturing, 12 values, and Knowledge, 12 values. The acronym is BANK, B-A-N-K, Blueprint, Action, Nurturing, Knowledge. You read and you drag and drop them in the order of the one that's most like you to least like you. And based on the values, you get a determination of what that person values. Some people are more into plans and processes and procedures. That's the kind of person that's very individualistic, that you will assign to them that type of work. Other people are very engaging. They like competition, and they're spontaneous. They like freedom and flexibility. You may put them into more of a sales type. And even though you may not have sales on your team, we're all selling something all day. We're selling ideas, we're selling collaboration, we're selling DEI and teamwork. We're selling something. We're selling our ideas upwards. We're trying to sell to a neighboring department to team with us. So again, you can do a better job of placing people when you understand. You can also do a better job of hiring people if an assessment like this is part of that package, because you can tell whether or not someone is going to be a good fit based on some of these things. Now, like I said, we have other assessments as well. This is one of my favorites because it's very quick and easy. When I send you the link and you take this assessment, you're going to get a report, and I'm going to get the same report. And it's going to be several pages explaining your style and the best ways to communicate and interact with you. Very easy to understand. You're not going to get charts and graphs that you have to. We do assessments that give you those too, but you're not going to get the charts and graphs that you have to decipher. You're going to get narrative that explains things to you. So that would be one thing. The other thing I would say is imagine, let's see if I can do this. Imagine a triangle, because I'm doing this freehand and it's not coming out real well. But imagine a triangle. I know you can't hardly see that, but I've got 3 sections to that triangle. The bottom part, which is the widest at the base, would be your employees that don't know. So maybe that particular individual, maybe they're individualistic, but if they knew the importance and the value of being more collaborative, maybe they could put that on while they're at work and do that. So you want to make sure that they know. Some employees don't know. You need to explain it to them. That middle section, as it narrows, that middle section of the triangle would be don't know how. So you might have this employee who's very individualistic. Now they know they need to be more collaborative and engaging, but it's not natural for them. They don't know how. So you put them through training, you give them a coach, you give them a mentor, an inclusion ambassador, whatever you need to do to help teach them some of these interpersonal skills you want them to have. The top portion, which is the smallest part of that triangle, is those that won't. So you have the don't know how, no, the don't know how, and won't. When you get to people where you've explained it to them, you've given them the tools and the resources, and they still won't do what it is that you asked them to do, now you've got a totally different decision on your plate. You might want to get HR involved, because if people understand the requirements of the job, they've been given all the training and proper resources to do the job, and they refuse to do the job. I can't tell you how you do things in your organization, but in my organization, I would probably start an exit strategy for that particular individual.
We have a few more questions. One here is from Jeremy. He says, how do you deal with the internal saboteurs of DEIB initiatives? At what point do you know when someone is salvageable or when it's time to consider termination?
Okay, good question. So first, when we're starting with those who want to sabotage the organization, those saboteurs are people, they don't see what's in it for them. They see this as a zero-sum game, and they see that if we give more to those people, there's less for me. So you need to make sure that those people, the saboteurs, understand what's in this process for them. For example, very high level, but for example, if we can, let's say that in that meme I showed you, the 3 people looking over the fence, let's say that each one of them has to do something with sales related to that baseball game. If only one person or only two people can see over the fence, the company isn't doing as well because not all of those baseball scouts are now able to see the game effectively. That's not only impacting their salary, it's impacting your salary as well. Because overall, as an organization, if we're not producing, we're going to see cutbacks, whether those cutbacks come to budgets, whether they come to personnel, we're going to see some cutbacks. So whereas you might not understand why certain people are getting what you see as advantages that you're not getting, if people really understood the difference between equity and equality, and if they could understand how treating people equitably helps them as well, they would get it. Also, we need to keep in mind that diversity is about everyone. It's not just about people who are not white, straight males. Straight white males are part of diversity as well. And I've seen in some organizations where they have ERGs for straight white males. It depends on the culture of your organization. What we're trying to do in the initiative is find out how we can service a certain constituency better. And whatever that constituency needs to be, in some organizations, they have groups for new moms, for single parents, whatever your constituency is that's important to you. But people have to see what's in it for them. And when they do, they are more likely to get involved and not sabotage. You can also tie their goals to some of this. Make sure that they have goals that are related to elevating diversity, equity, and inclusion. Then they're not going to be sabotaging, because if they do, they'll be sabotaging their own success as well. And I know there was a second part to that question, and I'm not remembering what that second part was. The first part was about being saboteurs. What was the second part?
The second one says, at what point do you know when someone is salvageable or when it's time to consider termination?
Okay, and that's when I use that triangle. When you have given them, when you've made them aware, you've given them access to all kinds of training, coaching, resources, et cetera, and they still will not comply, that's when, in my estimation, they're no longer salvageable. And we have funny feelings about doing that when it comes to DEI, but if it was numbers, if you had a sales rep that did not understand the way we sell or what our products are, they would fall into the don't know, you would advise them. Then if you had to put them into the don't know how, to give them the training that they need to be able to do it and all the resources, you would do that. And if they got to that next level where, okay, we've invested in you and you still won't produce the numbers that are expected of all of our sales rep, it would be a much easier conversation. But for some reason, when it comes to DEI, we add on layers and make it more complicated than it needs to be. DEI is a business goal and objective, just like sales and everything else in the organization. And when people don't meet their goals and they will not do anything to help themselves meet their goals, that's an easy decision for any business manager. You just have to stop looking at it, at DEI as being something different than the hard, fast business goals.
Right, great. And it looks like we just have one more question about that assessment that you were talking about with the bank. Someone said, can you tell us how again we can get that assessment? Dr. Linda, is it by contacting you personally, or what's the best way people can get more information on that?
Yeah, I'm going to put, so if you send an email to me at drlinda@turningpointlg.com, that is my personal email address. Even though my assistants see it, it will come straight to me and I will see it as well. You send that to me and tell me that you want the link, and I will send the link to you. And as I said, the only thing I ask is that you just use it for you. And if you find that it's something you might want to use in your organization and you want other people to look at it, then let me know. And we'll make some accommodation for that. But because we do charge for it, I just don't want people to use it all across the board. As I said, I get a report, so I will also know if you did not keep your word. So please, because I'm going to have a listing of everybody that was in this workshop, this webinar today, and I will compare it to that listing. So we'll know whether or not you're an honest person with integrity or not. But yeah, if you send me that email that you want the link, I will send the link to you. And once you take it, any questions that you have, I'd be happy to address them.
Perfect. Great. Dr. Linda, thanks so much. It looks like we answered all the questions. And if somehow we missed something, or if you want to ask a question to Dr. Linda directly, feel free to contact her. and reach out with those questions. But I want to say thanks again, Dr. Linda, for the amazing presentation. It was really interesting and very useful. We had so many questions, so that's a great sign to know that everyone loved it. And I want to say to everyone who is attending or who maybe showed up late, we will be sending the recording later this week. So look out for that via email. And thanks again for joining.
Thank you.
All right,
so
Dr.
much.
Linda.
It was a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
It was a pleasure too. Bye.